This year's election was the first time when the nation's foreign policy with China became an issue.
Marami talaga tayong issue, hindi lamang sa conflicting camps sa gitna ng Pilipinas at saka China. Kaya't ngayon lang ang nakita kong national election na naging issue ang West Philippine Sea or ang foreign policy.
Habang tinutuloy natin yung peace talks, itigil natin mga narintag na inosente po, na wala naman pong mga kasalanan.
The Robredo Pangilinan ticket is in the Visayas for dialogues with stakeholders. And Presidential Bet Isko Moreno says that he will continue shaking hands with his supporters despite warnings from the COMELEC.
Our lawyers will handle it. I'll handle the people. Doon ako sa taong bayan muna. Inaabot ko lahat ng tao. Di ba ganun ang gobyerno?
Today is the 9th day of the official campaign period, and tonight we conduct another interview with another candidate for president. What are his plans and platforms, and how will he act on his intentions for a better Philippines? We discuss in this episode of Face the Chiefs. Welcome to this edition of Face the Chiefs. I'm Robbie Alampay. Also with us are Ami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star, Luchi Cruz Valdez of News 5, and Ed Lingao of One News. Chiefs, good evening.
Good evening.
Happy midweek.
LCV, medyo naka-mute ka pa. We'll get to Luchi.
Baka wala siyang load.
We'll get to that later. But in the meantime, Ami, very quickly, before we get to our guest, ano ba mga balita?
Well, mukhang lumalambot na yung COMELEC dun sa mga campaign guidelines, ano? Baka po nire-review na nila. Ewan ko naman kung paano i-is nila. Baka tanggalin lang yung face shield requirement. Unang-una, wala naman sumusunod. Ewan ko lang yung mga kissing and hugging and shaking hands kung matatanggal yun.
Now, in the meantime, speaking of campaigns, Ed, I mean, I actually haven't seen the details yet, pero may balita, lumabas na rin may lumabas na survey ng SWS.
survey for the last 2 weeks of January, commissioned by ADR, with Marcos being at 50% from 51 in December, mid-December. So
within margin, pero bumaba.
Within the margin, pero pa yan. Ang significant, I suppose, is Robredo moving up to 19 from 14 in December.
5.
So, nagnaro ng konti lang ang margin.
Now, yung iba, pababa, I think I saw sila Isko, Manny Pacquiao at 9 or 8, and then Ping Lacson, and then tinatawag po natin, the others, less than 1 yung iba, but still early, and in all fairness, as we saw yesterday in the forum, these other candidates have a lot to say as well.
Have a lot to say.
Have a lot to offer as well with the country. And so we speak with one of them tonight. We begin tonight with presidential aspirant Norberto Gonzalez. Good evening, Mr. Gonzalez, and welcome po to the Chiefs.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, sir.
Sir, we might also start off. I mean, a lot of people might not know you, but of course, you did serve as Defense Secretary. You were also National Security Advisor. You've served on peace panels, on peace processes, and so on. And yet, we go back to what we originally said. People don't know you. To all intents and purposes, you're a private citizen. Let's start with that. What pushes somebody like you, who's now a private citizen, must be enjoying your life at this point? Why push yourself to run for president?
Well, for one, I had a political party, the Partido Demokratiko Socialista ng Pilipinas, and this is a political party's act. Of course, our elections, and then when we sense the kind of electorate that we have today, perhaps we say that there is a possibility that politicians like us may have a chance meaning that medyo nagiging importante na yata ang pagdidiscussion ng mga programs and issues. There might be a chance that our people might be receptive to discussing programs, issues, visions of the future, kind of society we want. These are some of the subject matter that we want to discuss with our people. We see possibility that these ideas can be listened to by our people today, unlike other elections in the past.
Sir, let me back up. Let me back up a bit. Well, actually, not a bit. Let me back up a lot. You have had a very, very colorful life from the 1970s with Hasik Kalayaan to PDSP, which was accused by Marcos, for example, in the 1970s of bombing. Which was also disproven. So you're clearly on the side of the anti-Marcos forces during that time. Also, at the same time, you were part of a group that helped set up the MNLF camps in Sabah, Malaysia, to train the first batch of MNLF fighters. So you do have a very colorful and interesting history. But I wonder, from your point of view, do you think that people remember those points of your life where you took a stand and where you made your mark in history?
Well, from what I see, I think I have to go back to our people. As you can see, my rating is at the bottom. I'm starting from 0. So that is an indication that people may have forgotten my involvement in the past, my activities with the government of President Arroyo. I don't know if that has been remembered. More so, my activities during the underground years.
Yes.
But given the developments of today, perhaps it's good to recall history.
Pero sir, just to that point, how was it like for you being on the same stage with Bongbong Marcos? Given your past, given what you went through, and given the positions that you took in the 1970s and in the 1980s, I think a lot of people who knew you and knew your background were a bit surprised that there were not as much fireworks as would have been expected.
Well, the fireworks depends on the questions. You know, nobody questioned us about. The questions asked is mostly in foreign relations and defense and security. So there's no reference to what we feel about Bongbong Marcos.
Pero kahit po but even in your campaigns, no, wala po kaming naririnig mula sa inyo na pagbabatikos, halimbawa kay Bongbong Marcos, na alam nga po namin sa biografiya ninyo ay talaga namang siguro sabihin na natin the few number who do know you, who do know a bit of your personal history as well as your history in politics, know how you are at one point rabidly anti-Marcos. But so have you changed your position? Have you mellowed? And what do you think about a Marcos running again?
Well, siguro hindi nyo lang nadinig. Meron ako mga interviews that I felt bad pa nga after masyado namang intense yung aking pagkakasalita tungkol sa candidacy ni Bongbong Marcos. But I have been speaking.
Pero ano po yung masasabi niyo that he is now leading? In fact, pati itong latest this month, the latest from Pulse Asia and SWS, siya pa rin po ang nangunguna. It's a commanding lead ahead of the second placer, si Vice President Leni Robredo. What does that say about our political system or our electorate? Ano po yung masasabi niyo?
Well, yan nga ang tinitingnan kong mabuti. My major trust actually in my decision to run for the presidency is really our electoral system and the way our politicians are behaving. I said that this is actually, in a way, hindering the nation from moving forward. Unless we conduct our reforms on our politics, the chance of having a better future may be dim. So that's what I'm trying to discuss with our people. And in the case of, when I was asked about the candidacy of Bongbong Marcos, what I said is that I think we have an important mission, or not to allow our history to be revised. It's very important that our young people continue and to see and recognize what our history. We cannot just put that aside. The claim that Bongbong Marcos, for example, should not be blamed for the sins of his father. You know, we think that why not? He's the administrator of the wealth that we thought his family stole during the time of the dictatorship.
Ang suggestion niyo po to change the political system is to shift to a parliamentary system. Siguro po explain niyo exactly kung ano, how will that change significantly? Halimbawa tong electoral system natin, the way we vote, the way we pick our leaders.
Ay, ang hirap talaga ng ating electoral system because the way our politicians have abused our electoral system. Ang nangyayari talaga na basis ng panalo is really money and in a way deception, and actually shaping the opinion of our people through lies in our history. That cannot continue.
Nabanggit nyo nga po, I mean, despite how difficult everything is and how much of an uphill climb this is for your candidacy, you have faith, you said, and you have some confidence, or maybe at the very least some curiosity. If our people are hungry for these conversations that you want to have, want to discuss issues and not personalities, are you finding that now that you're campaigning? Ano pong impression nyo sa ating electorate?
I'm very encouraged, lalo na sa mga young people. Ang ganda ng response kasi yung mga last weeks before this February 8, ang ginawa ko naman talaga ay talking to our own people sa PDSP. You know, we've been there 50 years and marami kami mga sectoral organizations, and we have started talking to them first before going public. And ang maganda, talagang makikita ko na they are very eager to discuss, especially the future. At kung anong pwedeng gawin para makita natin yung dapat gawin sa future. I floated the idea of a first world Philippines. That's very exciting to many of them. Masasabi ko kasi that paano tutulong ang isang gobyerno na mahirap sa kanyang mga citizen rin na mahihirap. Paano ko tutulungan ng citizen rin na mahihirap kung ang gobyerno mahirap? In our economic system, para we have relied so much on the activities of few families or individuals, and hoping that kapag yumayaman yung mga individuals, yayaman din ng ating gobyerno. There has been no focus on making sure that we enrich our government so that it can help our people. Things like those, when we tackle this and discuss this with our people, mukhang attractive. Mukhang maganda naman ang engagement and discussions. And recently, when I begin to talk about educational system sa mga young people, there appears to be enthusiasm, especially when I say that why is it that in our society, yung edukasyon natin may pangmahirap at may pangmayaman. Why can't we have a common standard for both rich and poor? Issues like this,
yes, sir.
I think are appealing to the young people.
Okay. Sir, cambio lang ng konti. In an interview with the program Candidates 2022 in Mindanao, sponsored by among other groups yung Minda News, ang sabi po ninyo, you prefer autonomy over federalism. But at the same time, you qualify that by saying that you prefer autonomy for all the regions in the country versus federalism for all the regions in the country. Could you walk us through po the differences? Of course, there are many similarities, but at the same time, we'd like to see, from your point of view, yung nuancing ng differences na yun. Why one over the other?
Well, yung federalism kasi, given the situation in the world, I think nations should not become smaller but become bigger. When we propose federalism, it's more for the future, at the same time recalling some of the historical antecedents that might lead to it. When during the time of Rizal and other heroes of ASEAN, of Asia, they were thinking of uniting the Malay race. And President Macapagal, if you remember, joined that initiative of Mapilindo, yung Malaya, Philippines, Indonesia, trying to form a federal state. And we're saying that if we are to talk federalism, especially today, I think what would be exciting and attractive would be thinking of a federal state of the ASEAN region, if not the whole of Southeast Asia. And then in the case of the Philippines, maybe we can just think of autonomy for all regions. If we're saying that the Muslims should be granted autonomy, and when we begin to analyze what are the basis of the request of the Muslim brothers to have autonomy, essentially the problems they are citing exist in all our regions. So why offer autonomy only to our Muslim brothers? Why not autonomy for all regions? So these are questions that I'd like to raise, and early in the administration, because having experienced the fact that when we talk of charter change, for example, people are suspecting that during the time of President Arroyo, that we are doing charter change to extend the term of President Arroyo. That is unfortunate, because it was done just about the time when she was leaving office. In my case, I think we will start the discussion on charter change as early as possible. And ideas like autonomy for all regions, shifting to the parliamentary system, maybe this should be discussed as early as possible.
Okay. Mr. Gonzalez, we will just need to take a break. Please stay with us. The Chiefs will be right back.
Thank you.
And tonight we continue our conversation with aspirants for the coming 2022 elections. Let's find out the plans of the candidates as they face the Chiefs. With us, of course, is presidential aspirant Norberto Gonzalez. Now, in this segment, we will ask the candidate about his views on important issues. Now, we prepared some big-ticket issues, but we will not do a fast talk kind of interview. We hope to discuss all of these issues within the given time, which is 30 minutes. Actually, maaga pa ng konti, so let me squeeze in a few questions before you get to that part. Sir, Yeah, last night sa debate sa SMNI or is it SNMI, you mentioned kasi the question was ano are you willing to sign a waiver to disclose bank statements as well as well yung SALN. But I think you push it a step further by saying that everybody who files an ITR may as well disclose their ITRs. Do you refer po to everybody as well in the private sector o public sector lamang?
Pati si Ed Lingao.
Well, there are countries in the world that, this information is available to all, which means all citizens. Yung income tax returns are published and are found in their libraries. If you go to Sweden and you go to the library and you want to check the income tax return of any citizen in Sweden, you will find it.
Even private citizens, even private citizens, even people who are...
So pagka yung kapitbahay ko, umuwi na may bagong luxury car, pwede kong busisiin. Paano bang binabayaran ito sa taxes?
Yeah, I mean, kasi doon sa Sweden, the assumption is people are they're paying their taxes accurately. Maybe that this will be a good start in the Philippines.
Pero sir, to this point, we're in the Philippines.
We are making a big issue of sound and then bank deposits.
But,
I think, why make an issue?
But I do want to pursue this. Sir, because yung sa SALN in particular, which seems the most basic, because unang-una nasa batas na yun.
Oh,
it's already there, and yet all the candidates seem to be. Why is it so hard for other candidates to say yes, okay, go, and they seem to be framing it as kung ako ay may option, I will opt to give. Rather than just say, yan yung batas, yan yung, it is not an option, it is a requirement.
Parang utang na loob natin.
Parang utang na loob pa natin. Why is it so hard for politicians to just say, yes, okay, that's the policy, because in fact, it's already the law?
Really more to the point, why would the ombudsman
Exactly.
There you go.
rule in their favor?
There you
No?
go.
Tulungan kami na nanghimik na. Kasi, di ba, one man, the ombudsman, actually overruled the law on this matter.
Kailangan mo raw
what do you
magpaalam
think
sa may-ari
about that?
ng SALN.
Ewan ko, dati yung pagkakatanda ko during my years in the office, yung paggawa ng song is not controversial. Kasi nagkataon lang yata that in our recent history, ginamit yung song para tanggalin yung isang Supreme Court Justice natin.
Yes.
Doon nagsimula yan biglang naging very serious yung song. Automatic, actually, if you're in office, that's really submitted and open. No, wala na. In fact, kung medyo nagkamali ka, you can always say, "Oy, sorry, nagkamali, pakidagdag nga ito, pakiparos yan," something like that. And then suddenly it become a very serious document.
So are you saying that it put government officials on the defensive? Is that an accurate way to say it? And now they're saying, ayoko na lang pakita kasi baka hanapan niyo ako ng dumi.
Which is actually, to me naman, I'm surprised by that kind of reaction. Bakit ka matatakot kung wala ka namang itinatago, di ba? So, what I'm trying to say is that in the past, at least during my time, wala naman akong problema sa pag-report ng SAL. Tapos kung titignan ng kahit sino, ano naman ang problema kung titignan?
Well, yung requirement na yan is to promote transparency and accountability. Malaki pong problema natin yan ngayon. Corruption is endemic na nga daw. Kung mananalo po kayo, ano yung mga programa nyo for curbing corruption, for promoting good governance?
Part of, I have asked friends in the international during our time, paano mo kami tutulungan para maalis sa corruption? Ang sinasabi sa akin sa corruption, simple lang naman yan yung philosophy ng ating public service, actually, when it is premised on mistrust, lalong nagkakaroon ng maraming corruption. Because when you mistrust, you tend to create as many steps in a given transaction para kasi to check, no? Kasi you mistrust. So you put so many. But in fact, during my time, I told the President, Gloria Macapagal-Arroyo, na, Ma'am, if we reduce the steps in transactions with government by 50%, there's a big probability that we will reduce corruption by 50%. Because every step in the requirement in government transaction is an opportunity for corruption. And the more steps you add, the more temptation for people to just approach you and say, sa hirap naman at tagal ng transaction, magbibigay na lang ako ng something, no? Para mapabilis yung transaction. So these are some of the ideas that we picked up. No? And so what is important for corruption to be lessened or totally avoided is keep everything simple, transparent. And yung hindi ba yung kakailangan mo pang abogado para ipaliwanag yung mga rules and regulations of certain things that we do with government.
There are some LGUs that we know are proof of this. Binawasan yung mga transactions, how to set up a company, how to get a barangay clearance or a business clearance, and so on. And you're right, the less steps, less human intervention, the better. But I want to go back to something that you said more fundamental than that. You said that we cannot have a system that starts off with mistrust, right?
Yes.
But the ironic thing is eto na po tayo, and we have a lot of reasons to distrust our politicians, to distrust our systems. Give us an example of, something that we can start off on a premise of trust that lends itself to efficiency and better governance.
Actually, it's really when we do business with government, keep things simple and clear. Walang makikita kung meron kang gagawin. Sa akin, any transaction in government can be cited for this. For example, one time I was in the Netherlands. I applied for a visa, and the lady in the window gave me an application form which I filled out, and then give it to her, and then she's the one who also accepted the money from me, the fee, and she's the one who stamped the approval of the visa. She's the one who signed it and gave it to me. What is the significance of that? The significance of that is that you would know if something messy happens with that visa application, you will know the person who did it. In our system, a particular transaction passes through too many hands.
Yeah.
And the bad thing about this is that sometimes, in our practice, because of mistrust, we give responsibility to our bureaucrats without corresponding authority. We keep the authority ends up on the top. Because in other systems, when you give a responsibility, you give a corresponding authority. From there, you can already discover if there's any anomaly.
Yes, sir. Sir, before we leave the issue of transparency po, let me squeeze in one more. Yung sa tanong ni Attorney Rolex Suplico, in second part of his question about the waiver of the bank secrecy law. I wanted to hear some of the answers. I'm not sure how you answered it, pero yung ibang mga kandidato, inintay ko yung sagot, pero mukhang hindi nasagot eh. Kayo po ba? What is your answer to that? And were there rivals among your group that you wanted to hear of ng kanilang bank accounts?
Ako naman sabi ko, yes. Ang tanong pa ni Congressman Suplico ay yung mga anak mo, kamag-anak ko, well, yes, of course. Why be so secretive? Transparency is one item that probably we can start with.
But is there anybody among your ranks for the presidency whose interest you might have to take a peek into his bank accounts?
Sana nanood ka, nakita mo naman kung sino yung uncomfortable dun eh.
Well, sir, nanonood ako pero hindi ko wala sa TV eh. Siyempre, not unless you zoom in, not unless you're there, you can't see the reactions eh.
Well, mahirap magsalita, pero sa apat sa amin, meron isang uncomfortable.
Okay.
Well, yung pong problema ng corruption, pati yung pandemic response natin naapektuhan So, isa pang tanong ngayon, because we are still 2 years into the pandemic, mukhang hindi pa naman matatapos, ano po ang gagawin nyo kung manalo kayo? What is your pandemic exit strategy?
Well, ako, I am not thinking of an exit strategy. No? Kasi ang nababalitaan ko sa medical community, magkakaroon tayo ng relief. Pero baka may umulit at may dumating. It's better to be ready, which means that we have to adapt to this kind of lifestyle. So ang iniisip ko lang, ang mga nakita nating lessons from the past 2 years are these. Number one, kailangan ang in-charge talaga ng pag-design ng protocol at pag-administer ng cure. We have to be given to our scientific and medical community. They should be on the forefront of the fight. Hindi po pwede na yung walang training sa medical ang magdidikta pa sa mga doktor natin kung anong gagawin. You know, we can always, we should trust our medical community and scientific community to do this. Number two, I was just wondering, how come when we were looking for vaccines and medicines for the pandemic, bakit yung procurement ng Malacanang ang naghahanap, hindi yung ating mga pharmaceutical industry? We have a relatively good pharmaceutical and drug industry in the country. Government could have dealt with this. That was a time of emergency. You can really tap the private sector to do things for you. It's a matter of really just monitoring them properly. They are in that business and they would know where and how to find the vaccine and deliver it as fast as possible to us. And ginawa para tayong namimili ng ballpen at saka ng mga kung ano-ano materialis na ginagamit ng gobyerno. You know, that is an emergency. I thought we could have trusted our pharmaceutical and drug industry to do the solving the supply problem of our vaccines, drugs, etc.
Sige. Mukha pong nandito na po tayo sa stage that we can start asking you specific questions. Let's go to something that we always ask at the very top, and not just us, but a lot of people, especially emerging from the Duterte administration. If you become president, how will you handle the war on drugs?
You know, dalawang pa yan eh. We can divide it into two parts of that problem. Number one, it seems to me that we have become the transit point of drugs. You cannot imagine, if you try to recall even the past, last 10 years ago maybe, ang nahuhuling drugs sa Pilipinas, kilo-kilo lang. Pero during this administration, naging tunila-tunilada. What is the implication of that? If you try to check the tons of drugs coming to the Philippines, there's no way we can consume that in the Philippines. We are a transit area. We have allowed that to happen. So I said that I think we know more or less where these drugs are coming from. So we have to talk at the highest level. We have to tell the leader of the country, whom we all know or guess where it's coming from, tell the leaders of the country, please naman, a little respect. You know, if you want to poison the rest of the world, don't do it through us. And that we can do either diplomatically or more harsher words. And then the other point is the users. You know, there was a golden opportunity that happened during the early days of this so-called drug war. I'm not saying that it's the good approach. It was a horrible approach that you start killing people in the communities. The thing is that some communities did not complain because there was a reduction of crime in those areas. But the other thing that resulted in that campaign when there were killings everywhere is that literally hundreds of thousands of our people, users of drugs, big users, small users, they all surfaced. They all went. They all go to our police, they surface, report it to government, and say, here we are. We will no longer use drugs. We want to be cured. We want to be rehabilitated. And yet, what did we do? What did we do with the thousands and thousands of our countrymen who, because probably of fear, surfaced? That is a phenomenon that may not be repeated again. That is probably the kind of opportunity that we could have addressed really the drug problem. But what did we do to those people who surrendered?
Yeah.
Some of them pinatay pa rin. And then we started building structures for rehabilitation purposes, buildings. We never really knew what happened to these buildings na pinaganito. Yung programa natin sa rehabilitation, wala naman tayong masyadong nadidinig kung ano talagang nangyari. I don't know, I will try. I will not be killing people. That's a no-no. But I wish we can convince our drug users to surface again so that we can help them.
So we squander that opportunity, but well,
That's monumental tragedy. Imagine the opportunity we have. Not so many countries have experienced that kind of phenomenon wherein all the drug users literally surface and ask for help. And we didn't respond.
Well, the resultant effect actually over the long run was, well, here we are, and the government or President Duterte in particular is being hauled to ICC, and as a result of which he has decided that he will withdraw us from the ICC. What's your stand on that?
Oh my God, look at that. You know, what a shame. Imagine crime against humanity. You know, the implication of that case is not only that something inhuman has happened in our country, it is also a condemnation of our justice system. That particular court don't enter a country where they think the justice system is working. If they intervene in our country, it simply means that they do not trust our justice system. And that is very shameful in the world, to the world. No? Grabe talaga nangyari sa atin.
So you do agree that there's a basis for the ICC?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
But this is something that we must do. If I will be there, you know, we have to redeem the trust of the world to us. We will allow the ICC to conduct its business, but we must do a parallel in our country. We have to do something also about it. Fundamental. If we want the respect of the world, other nations, there are things we have to do ourselves. As we repair our justice system, we have to show that maybe a dramatic case such as this, we should try to handle as well. We will not prevent the international government from doing their job. We will help them. But perhaps we will cooperate with them in the same manner that we will ask their cooperation, that we can handle cases like this ourselves also.
Pero babalik po tayo sa ICC. Payag kayo doon. If you become president, ibabalik niyo Pilipinas sa ICC and the Rome Statute?
Of course, we should. We went through long debates before we entered the ICC during our time. It was during our time that we entered the ICC. There were objections from other countries telling us not to join. And perhaps you can guess one or two countries trying to discourage us from joining. But we did. We joined the ICC. And what a mess that we withdraw, not because we have some fundamental objections to it, it's because somebody wants to save himself.
As we had mentioned, you were former national security advisor. You were involved in the peace talks, both with with MILF as well as CPP, NPA, NDF, both as part of the panel as well as involved in back channel talks. How would you restart the peace talks, and how do we sustain it, and more importantly, how do we make it succeed?
Well, you see, it really depends, but it's a moral obligation of government to keep the talks open. We cannot be the beacon type here. It's our obligation to keep talking. We have to keep open the avenue for peaceful talks all the time, even if the other side is belligerent. We will keep it open. If they want to talk, we talk. If they want to close it, we wait. And if they want to talk again, we talk again. Okay. But in the meantime, there are certain fundamentals that we have to begin informing our people or telling our people. Number one, we cannot allow armed groups to determine the direction of change in our country. For example, in the Bangsamoro, I have said before and now, we cannot allow the armed groups in Muslim Mindanao to determine the future of Mindanao, Muslim Mindanao. How about the peace-loving people? If we have to conduct peace talks with the rebels, we must also do a parallel of explaining to our people what's going on. We have to tell them what are the parameters of the talks. Number one, violence is no longer accepted as a mechanism or as a means of achieving societal change. It is no longer accepted in any part of the world. That belongs to some decades ago. Now, societal change can be pursued peacefully. For example, this issue of red tagging and all of that. Why is there such a thing? Because, our communists, for example, why can't they realize that it's no longer illegal to be a communist in the Philippines?
Well, sir, to that point, sir, I think they realize that. I think they realize that very, very much and very, very well. I suppose the problem is that the other side, from the government side, they don't seem to realize that it is no longer illegal since the repeal of the anti-subversion law.
You see, what is existing today is the need for clarification. Clarification. We should not be condemning communists. They can go out, form parties, engage in our elections. What is illegal, what is a crime, is when you use arms, when you employ violence to further your ideological objectives. You see, when you point a gun to our communities or to our people to force them to follow your kind of ideology, then that is in the Philippines. It is the use of violence that is wrong. It's the use of violence that is considered terrorism. And yes.
So do you think that there was good enough reason to actually draft an anti-terrorism law, and because that's a new law and it's now in effect, but it's very controversial. So in light of what you were saying, the red tagging accusations actually came out of that the debate on terrorism and how to address it. In other words, there's an association being made between the left and terrorism.
We have to review that. We have to review that because what should be relevant is this. We cannot deny that there is rebellion in the Philippines. We cannot deny that there is subversion in the Philippines. And yet there is no specific, rebellion and subversion, because of its political character, requires a special law. We don't have that. We do not have that kind of law. And what do we use to treat rebels or subversives? We use our criminal law. We immediately condemn them as criminals. They're not criminals. but we have no law governing them. We repealed the RA 1700 and did not replace it with a law that will be in accordance to what we have today. I would suggest that we will have a law on rebellion and subversion with a particular time frame, that we will have best estimate, yes, maybe in 5 years with no more rebellion, no more subversion. So we will have a law with an expiration date that needs to be evaluated from time to time so that we will know that we don't need a rebellion law on rebellion and subversion anymore because we don't have any anymore. What's the point? You see, this anti-terrorism happens at the height of the American enthusiasm to capture those that inflicted them the most heinous of terrorist act in U.S. soil. Remember 9/11? That's it. So they dragged the whole world into a particular frame of mind. And we are carrying this up to this day. I would think that we should reconsider the anti-terrorism law. It hints of situations that does not exist in the Philippines. What we need is an evaluation of the rebellious situation in the Philippines and also the subversion.
Yes, sir.
Let's evaluate this thing and come up with a law that fits what our society needs.
Mr. Gonzalez, of course, yung malaking problema doon is poverty. It's driving insurgencies. And babalikan ko na yung pandemya. Apart from public health crisis, we have an economic crisis, the worst since World War II. Kung mananalo po kayo, what will be your economic recovery program? Ano po yung priorities ninyo?
Well, before I go to that, may I just continue with the pandemic formula that I was thinking of. It's very important that we boost the immune system of our community by providing them the right kind and the amount, enough and the right kind of food, nutrition to boost the morale. And it's the agricultural department will have to be pushed to start producing enough food for our country that is not dependent on importation. Number two, we have to keep our communities clean all the time. Hindi yung mga local officials na pasumpong-sumpong lamang na naglilinis ng kanilang neighborhoods. Now, we have to keep the Philippines clean. It's very important to building our immune system. And then crowding in our communities. Especially in the provinces, you would see communities are so crowded in the midst or surrounded by empty lands, properties that has nothing in it. I think during emergencies, we will have to ask the owners of those land to allow for us to build temporary homes so that we can decongest our communities during times of pandemic. That being said, the economic factor, the pandemic itself changed the way we earn a living. And that is, to me, an important thing to be considered. You see, many employed, many workers in the United States and other parts of the world are leaving their work. Maybe we can start learning from that kind of episode in the workplace. We can begin to encourage the self-employment. We create our own work. We create our own system of living. And how will government respond to that? You see, in the social democratic concept of economy, of economic growth, we believe as social democrats that economic growth cannot be left to few individuals or interests. It has to be spread to as many of our citizens as possible. What has to be the responsibility of the many versus the few. So what are we going to do? So we will open capital to our poor who would like to create self-employment, small businesses, micro businesses. We will give them capital. And what is our argument? when big business, for example, the airlines, shipping industry, when there's a shift in, for example, in the cost of fuel, they run to government. They say, look, we will lose, the airline industry will be losing because the sudden increase in the price of kerosene or in the bunker oil in the case of ships. Our big business always come to government when they meet problems, and we respond. We subsidize them. So I said, why are we not doing this to our ordinary people? So we will create funds to make capital available to those who would like to have their own source of income. And if they fail, we will have sovereign guarantee on those funds so that the banks will not be afraid to lend money to our poor or to our ordinary people. We will guarantee that. If it fails, we give the same privilege that we give to our very rich to our very poor. What now? And then, how about the big businesses? We will appeal to them. You know, we know for a fact that big business actually earned during the pandemic years. There are claims as much as 30%. They increased their wealth by 30% during the pandemic years. So they have money. So what do we do with our big business? I would say that we will appeal to big business that if you will use your money to expand your businesses, I think they will not disagree if you ask them to expand their businesses, use their money, but they have to expand their businesses instead of distributing it to their shareholders during this recovery period. We will ask them that. If you decide to use your money for expansion of your business, because that will mean more opportunities for work, we will give you incentives, tax incentives. But if you decide to use the money to give it to your shareholders, we will tax that particular money that you will give to your shareholders.
Yes, sir. Sir, if you don't mind, sir, let me squeeze in one more question from my end. It's good to hear you talk about kanina about people should have the freedom to have their own political beliefs so long as they don't pick up the gun. And that's a pretty clear statement coming from you in this age where there's a lot of red tagging going around. But I also remember in 2006 during Gloria Arroyo's all-out war against the New People's Army when you were National Security Advisor. That was, I understand, if I recall correctly, that was the start of the real red tagging, where so-called front groups, militant groups, were being tagged as front groups of the New People's Army. Doon nga nagsimula yung talagang maraming nawala na mga aktivista. And that was one of the major complaints during that all-out war.
You see, this labeling, of red tagging, labeling on the other part, government actions are always labeled with the wrong, how do you call it? For example, total war. What we were saying during our time is total approach to the insurgency in the Philippines. What does that mean? I actually outlined about 5 points in this matter. And it doesn't include assassinating people. During the time that we were there, this is the time when the CPP, NPA, NDF also changed their strategy. In the past, there was a very big distinction within the communist movement between those who are holding arms and those who are engaged simply in political activities. But during our time, there was a merger of those engaged in politics and those engaged in arms. And you see, it was very, very difficult this is just before I entered the Defense Department and my office as National Security Advisor. This is the situation that I encountered during that time when there will be an encounter and then there will be a chase. Then the MPAs will be running straight into houses, and then they will come out with an idea of bayan muna, or those front organizations, and the soldiers are really. So what do we do? You cannot touch them. That's why it is during this time that we really have to clarify the distinction, or is there still a distinction between members of the Communist Party who are engaged in military action or in simply political action. It is their decision to put these two things together. Yung parang fighter by night and politician by morning. Things like this has happened during those times.
Okay. Anyway, Mr. Gonzalez.
It was very difficult. But I just want to proceed a little bit. You should understand that one of the things we employed, and this is what I told Joe Season and what will happen to his people. I said, I have no intention of killing any communist. But I will pursue those who will engage in armed struggle and put them in jail. That is why we have created this particular campaign wherein our troops during my time will have police elements. Our soldiers are not trained to gather evidence. You cannot file a case afterwards because they mess up the evidence after a fight. Police are trained to gather evidence so that we can file subversion cases after. The problem is when we file subversion cases, there is no subversion law.
Okay, Mr. Gonzalez, unfortunately, we are out of time. In fact, we're over time. We only have literally only have a minute. We'll probably give you 30 seconds, sir, if you could, for your final message to the Filipino people.
Well, I am in this campaign to make our people realize how important politics is and what damage the way we practice politics in the future of our nation. I would like to appeal, especially to our young people, take politics seriously.
Okay.
Don't be carried away by this fiesta-like atmosphere going on these days.
Okay. Maraming salamat po, Mr. Norberto Gonzalez ng Partido Demokratiko Sosyalista ng Pilipinas. Sir, maraming salamat po. Mr. Gonzalez is running for
sir.
President.
Ingat, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dan. Salamat.
And that's all for this edition of the Chiefs. We hope what was discussed here will keep the conversation going. Before we go, a reminder to our viewers, mask on, wash hands, stay safe, Philippines, and Robbie Alampay.
I'm Mami Paminton of the Philippine Star.
I'm Lucy Cruz Valdez of News 5.
I'm Edwin Gao, and we are One News.